Hello and welcome to another one of my videos. In this video I'm actually going to take a second look at my carburetors. Now if you remember in the second episode where I actually tried to start my bike and actually did succeed in starting the CX500, one of these carburetors just constantly leaked out the overflow. Now initially I thought it would just been wrong float levels, it's just filling up too much and going out the overflow like it did. However, after thinking about it, it just constantly leaked as soon as there was fuel going into the carburetor. So ever since then I've had this niggly feeling there's been something else wrong with these carburetors, or the other side. And another thing is it was constantly leaking out the clean carburetor, not the one that was all gummed up, it was the clean one, which started to ring alarm bells. So yesterday after I finished some work on the bike, I thought I've got an hour to spare, I'll take the carburetors apart again and just have basically a bit more of an in-depth look. And when I took this float ball off and looked at the overflow tube, I don't know if the camera will pick this up because I'm not actually facing on the viewfinder, but there's a massive fracture going down the actual overflow tube. So that's why the fuel has been constantly leaking out of this carburetor. It's just basically been going straight through that fracture and out through the overflow. I checked the old carburetor, as in, well, not the old one, the actual one that was bunged up, and the emulsion tube on that one is, even though it looks a bit grotty, it's actually fine. So I now have to go about and fix this overflow tube. So if I stick my carburetors on the bottom, I'll go through some of the actual fixes I could do with this. The first one would be, and the simplest one would just be, get some fuel pipe which was the right inside diameter just to fit over this emulsion tube and just basically cover the fracture up. Cheap, easy fix, but to be honest I want something that's a bit more robust. You can use epoxy resin if it's tolerant to fuel in this fracture, so you basically just put epoxy on and then basically just wipe it down. The way I'm going to actually do this is to solder it, because all this is brass, so normal electric solder will take to this. So what I've got is, I have got my flux pen, which basically makes the solder actually flow where you want it. I've got my lead-free solder, and I've also got one of these £2 gas soldering irons which you can get off Amazon from China, and to be honest the quality of this for £2 is quite exceptional. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically heat this, put some flux on, heat it up, and just feed some of the actual solder into the fracture here. Being careful not to use too much because you don't want to actually block this tube up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all this sorted and then we'll get cracking. I'll just clean my area up. Okay, so I've got my area clear and I've got my float ball which I'm going to solder the actual overflow tube. So the first thing you want to need is a flux pen or just some ordinary solder flux, and basically all this does is you put it on the area where you want your solder to run to, so just up the fracture line there, and basically this just helps the solder actually flow into the actual fracture on the tube. So once you've done that, good little things then, you can then start applying the solder. So what I've got here is a little gas powered blowtorch which you can use for welding. £2 off Amazon, and the quality of them for £2 you can't really go wrong with. I've had this for a few months now and it's just great. And some solder which is now lead free these days. So first thing I'm going to do is just switch it on and adjust the flame. We don't really need that big of a flame. Like I say, it's got a little control mechanism on the side there. And then we just want to literally heat the tube up. And what this does is, you want to get nice and hot so the solder will actually take to it. And then once you've got it nice... Okay, so I'm now ready to start my soldering. I was going to use the gas powered soldering iron which I have here, and I was actually using it, hence why there's some actual solder on there. However, it's run out of gas and I don't know where the gas is. So I have reverted back to my option, well, plan B, and going for my 40 watt just electrical soldering iron. So basically what I'm going to do is, I've already added some flux there to make the actual solder flow, and this is going to be very awkward working backwards towards the camera. So What we need to do first is actually heat up the area where we want the solder to go on. So I'm just going to lie the soldering iron on the area where I want it, just for a couple of minutes. And just stick some solder on the other end of there and just let it flow into the gaps. The good thing about using a one of these electric ones with the flat chisel end is you can actually flatten the solder out into the crevices, which you can't do with that gas one. So there might actually be enough on here to do the whole thing. It's just trying to get your material you're working with to the same heat as the solder, because if it doesn't, it'll just literally sit on top of the actual item you're soldering. And as you can see, it's just literally flowing into the gaps. And then this should be my overflow problem sorted. Once I finish this, I'll tidy it up and file it down a bit. There we go. I'll just leave it there. Just for the time being, when the camera's off, I'll actually do a better job of it and show you, because trying to work backwards is a bit of a pain, and I've just lent on my wet sponge to clean my soldering iron with. So yeah, it doesn't look too neat there, but it's going to do the job, and I'll just quickly file that down with some sandpaper or file. I've got a few needle files which might do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and finish this job off, and then I'll come back and show you the final result. Okay, so I've actually finished the soldering. As you can see, I've just literally put a bead of solder all the way up the tube where the fracture was. I've done the blow through the hole and block the other end test, and there doesn't seem to be any leaks. So hopefully that's cured that problem. It's supposedly a common fault actually. When I actually found out what had happened with this, I actually looked it up on the net, and there's a few people actually said it's something that does happen regular with these carbs. So what I'll do now is I'll just stick all this roughly back together for the time being, and hopefully that's my leaking bowl problem sorted and fixed for, to be honest, hardly anything, because I've already got the parts. The main thing which I kind of try and show in these videos is don't be scared with all these mechanical older bikes are great to work on because they're all mechanical basically. They're just, everything is basically controlled by a mechanical method, and it's pretty easy to get your head around, and it's a good way of learning how the actual bikes work. And I just love them. So, like I say, that problem there took me, I would say, half an hour to fix. Hopefully. I can't test it out until I get fuel back into these carburetors and the bike going again, because as you all know, fuel will find any gap it can to get out of. So, until we can start it up and test it, we shall not be 100% sure. Another little tip here, before I actually forget, if you ever find that you've got a rounded cross-headed or Phillips screw, get a Dremel and just cut a nice neat straight cross through it, and then you can actually use a flat-headed screwdriver bit, a big one, to actually crack the actual screw out, which I've done on two of the screws such as this one. And basically if you can get a big flat-headed screwdriver in there, you'll be able to get enough force on it to actually crack it off. And then I've got a pile of stainless steel screws which are actually going into these carbs once I've finished. So yeah, little tip there for anybody who's got trapped screws, and you can get a Dremel in there to basically cut a little keyway in. So anyway, with that, I hope I've enlightened you, and if any of you have got the problem of a leaking float ball, just see if it's the actual overflow tube, because it might actually be that, from what I've found out, and give it a go and try and fix it yourself. So yeah, with that, I shall see you soon, and as always, keep safe.